Today's webinar, the Mighty Mekong, where we're headed this time next year. So literally right now, this time next year, we will be headed off to the Mekong River. And let me tell you all about it. First of all, for those of you who are new to Wheel and Anchor, our mission, my mission, why we started this community a few years back, is all about bringing like-minded travelers together. A few photos from some of our past trips, smiles on everybody's faces. But the most important thing is that, we sort of share a view about how to see the world and how to go to a place, learn something, respect the culture, talk to the people, and, not be, okay, I'm not going to put this in a negative sense, but just be a good traveler and, and inquisitive and learning and respectful and all those different things. And I think that that's something that we, particularly as Canadians, we are mostly a Canadian group. As most of you know, we have a small handful of folks from other countries, but we are mostly a Canadian group. And that is something that I think is really important and part of the experience. Along the way, again, my personal goal is that you all become well-traveled, and that I become well-traveled, that we all become well-traveled. And, every time you go to a place, even many of these places I've been, at least once, twice, maybe many times before. And yet I always learn something new or have a different experience, or, I'm somehow enriched by, by the travel and even with a trip like this, there's just so much to grasp, and we take a little bit of extra time. You'll see the way that we're doing it in Siem Reap. We're staying for a day or two longer, I think, than most tours do, because there's just so much to grasp. And so yeah, that's what being well-traveled is all about, and well-connected for us at Wheel and Anchor. So joining me today, there's Paula. Hi, Paula. Good morning. Is one of our senior trip specialists. I'm Gordon, the founder of Wheel and Anchor, and Barb is not with us today, but she's taken a much needed day off. We've had some busy days lately. Today, we're going to take you on a little journey through Southeast Asia, specifically Cambodia and Vietnam. And I'm going to give you this little digital tour today with some great photography, and tell you why this is the trip to go on next November. So let's dive right in to our program, the Mighty Mekong. Looking at the map, first of all, the whole thing starts in Siem Reap up in the top left corner. So Siem Reap is probably the most famous place in Cambodia as it relates to, tourism in certainly in the last 20 years. And, prior to that, tourism in Cambodia wasn't really a thing because, we all know some of the things that went on, and we'll learn about that on this trip. So to get to Siem Reap, most flights will go through Bangkok. So somehow you'll get to Bangkok and on to Siem Reap. And we obviously can arrange all those flights for you, but we will start in Siem Reap, and we're going to start with 4 nights in Siem Reap, again, so that there's lots of time, first of all, to get caught up from the journey, because let's face it, it's a bit of a journey to get to Southeast Asia. And so we want to make sure that you can arrive, relax, enjoy the time, enjoy the warm weather. We're going at an optimal time of the year for weather, because we're sort of just at the end of the dry season coming into the we're at the end of the wet season, coming into the dry season. November is the beginning of the dry season. And the weather is usually in the mid-20s. It's really lovely. Better place to be than I think most places in Canada in November. After our stay in Siem Reap, we are going to head overland to a place called Kampong Cham on the Mekong River, which is where we're going to join our ship. And then we make a meandering voyage down the Mekong over the course of a week, all the way passing the capital of Cambodia, Phnom Penh, crossing the border into Vietnam, going into the Mekong Delta, and then ending up in Ho Chi Minh City, otherwise known as Saigon, the capital of Vietnam. And then we also have which we're not going to talk about today. We have an extension program, a nice 13-day program that's going to go into the depths of Vietnam, all the way up the coast and up to Hanoi. But I won't talk about that today. I'll tell you a little bit what it's about. We're going to do a separate webinar on that program. So let's look at this. What are the highlights of our program along the Mighty Mekong? Well, first of all, it's Cambodia, it's Siem Reap, it's Angkor Wat, which you can see a magnificent picture of here. You've seen it before, you've seen it on documentaries, you've seen it in National Geographic. Angkor Wat is probably one of the best preserved and largest temple complexes that you'll find anywhere in the world. It is jaw-dropping. There's no other way to put it. But the interesting thing about Angkor Wat and about Siem Reap is it's not one thing. There's actually like 50 temples in the whole area around Siem Reap. So you could spend a month there and you wouldn't be able to see them all. However, because we're taking a little bit of extra time, we are going to see more than just Angkor Wat, and even Angkor Wat and Angkor Thom. You know, a lot of people will go, a lot of trips will go, and it's just like, okay, we're in for 2 nights, we've got a day, Angkor Wat, Angkor Thom. You've seen the 2 main ones, but the last time I was there, I got up to some of these other temples that enabled me to see some things where you were practically on your own. And anyway, it's amazing. So we'll arrive into Siem Reap. As I say, you'll have to likely fly via Bangkok, so you'll connect in the morning there and then come up sort of midday. We'll have a day at leisure. And, you know, the town is sprawling, but the old town, the authentic part of it, is actually quite charming. So you'll have time that day to either sort of wander around on your own. The nice thing is about Cambodia, it's safe. So you can go, you know, to the markets. Frankly, what I find after a long journey, most people just want to relax at the hotel, take a swim in the pool, just get caught up on the jet lag. So as I say, Siem Reap is quite an interesting town. It is pretty much solely dedicated to providing housing for travelers coming to visit Angkor Wat. We will, the following day, then actually go and venture into the town with our local guide. We'll visit some of these little markets. We'll taste some of the food. We'll go around and see a little museum, seeing old little houses, because I think that, again, it's important that we get a sense of quasi-rural life. I mean, Siem Reap isn't rural anymore. It's urban. It's a small city. It is touristy, but there are parts of it. When I was there, and this is part of the reason why we're doing it this way, is that I thought you can't miss this, because it's a shame to just go and like follow the rest of the tourists to the temple when there's so much more to explore, to enjoy in Siem Reap itself. And Cambodian food is a big part of it, because I think it's very distinctive. It has got its own set of curries, and they use similar ingredients that are similar to Thai food. And of course, everybody knows Thai food, but when was the last time you were in a Cambodian restaurant? Probably not recently. And so I think that, in my honest and humble opinion, Cambodian food is as good because it's the flavors are so diverse, even though, as I say, a lot of the ingredients, you know, the coconut, the lemongrass, the tamarind, and so on, are similar to what you'll find in the Thai kitchen, but it's just prepared in a different way. So anyway, as I say, we'll spend, you know, a nice half day. We'll have a lunch out in the town, visit the markets. And again, it's an additional day to sort of relax and get into it before we have 2 solid temple days. So these 2 days are going to be busy. Why? Because I want you to see as much as possible. And I want to do it in a way that, again, you know, my philosophy, tour bus is going this way, we're going this way. So we're going to get up early on this day. When I say early, we're going to get up before sunrise, because the feeling and of the sun, you know, rising and the light coming down, descending down, it literally descends down over the temple and then bathes the whole thing in that. It sends shivers down my spine now. It is unbelievable. We will not only do that, but we're going to take the back door, literally. We're going to go around and enter in by the east gate. So I've got these great partners in Cambodia, And we went through this program because I remember having been there myself, and I remember seeing, you know, 50 tour buses lined up at the front door, which is the west gate. Everybody lined up to go in at 9 o'clock kind of thing. We're going to get up early. We're going to go around to the back door at the east gate. I can't say we'll be the only ones there, but let's say we will be in a far fewer number than, you know, the masses arriving in the morning, and we'll have time to really enjoy and explore, and this feeling of it. So even if you've been there before, and if you went through the front door, it's just another different experience altogether. If possible, we're going to try and secure one of the monks. The monks get up at sunrise, of course, to do their alms, which is where they go around collecting food. And we're going to try and arrange for them to give us a special blessing in a part of the temple that, you know, we have a little bit to ourselves. So there's a few things in there that we're going to try and do special. So we'll spend the early morning at Angkor Wat. When the place starts to get busy, we're going to head out again. We're going to go to a traditional Angkor wooden house. So these were the structures, and, you know, there's very few of the ones that date back to the age of these temples, because of course the temples are made of stone 1200 years ago. But nevertheless, there are houses that are still inspired by that epoch. And we're going to have a cool Khmer breakfast there. And then we're going to continue on to see a couple of other sites. We're going to see Angkor Thom the same day. So this is the next to Angkor Wat, the second most important and also very impressive temple in the area. But we're also going to go and try and visit an Apopos, which is an NGO that was dedicated to clearing the landmines that were all Cambodia after the Civil War and the whole era of the Khmer Rouge was like literally littered with landmines. They were everywhere. So an NGO was set up. And they actually use rats, the poor rats, to go around and sniff out where all the landmines are. It's a fascinating thing to see, and to see how this has been developed. And there aren't any more landmines around now. They've cleaned them all around this area, so we don't have to worry. But nevertheless, there are still parts of Cambodia where they are. So yet another thing that we're going to do on this very full day. We're going to be out for the full day, but I tell you, it will be one of the most memorable days. We will do another day of visits. The highlight for this day, Bante Sray, the citadel for the women, as it's translated. And again, this is one that it's a little further away. You get far fewer people that come and visit this. But for me, what I remember about this temple, and it's not big. So Angkor Wat is a huge, surrounded by a massive moat. This is a smaller temple, nestled in the jungle. Part of it, the trees have grown through the rocks and are coming up. It's mysterious. But what particularly struck me about this place is the ornateness of the carvings. Like literally this, if you could imagine this whole temple and you go and look, you know, we've all seen temples before. I shouldn't say we've all seen temples. We've seen many temples before, but it's fascinating when you go up close. It's still interesting, but this one is like literally you can go right up to it and get this close away, and the ornate carvings and the way that this thing has been done, you would think it must have taken them a million years to build it. It is a phenomenal spot. And it was a private temple. So whereas the Angkor Wat and Angkor Thom and many of the other ones were royal temples, this was built by a counselor, like a lawyer, basically. Again, consecrated in 967. So a long time ago. But he put a lot of expense, a lot of time into this fascinating temple. So that'll be one of the highlights for the day. There's a few other stops that we're going to make along the way. The long and the short of it is we have 2 full days designed to get the most of what you can see around Siem Reap and Angkor Wat, and the whole empire and the whole area, but also done in a way where we are again trying to avoid the masses, because I have to be honest with you, generally these places are packed full of people, but we have the right kind of partners who know how to get us in the right place at the right time. So anyway, without further ado, we'll have had 2 amazing days there, and you're going to go, wow, how could it get any better? We will then drive from Siem Reap down to the down to the Mekong River, to a place called Kampong Cham. And we'll then get our first glimpse of this mammoth waterway, the third largest in Asia. It's like 4,000 kilometers long. We're just going to see the last bit, but nevertheless, a very impressive bit. I mean, the Mekong is a spectacular river, and we will embark that afternoon on the Pandaw ship. So let me say a few words about Pandaw. I love this company. I've sailed a few times in Southeast Asia on different ships. There are all kinds of different ones. There's fancy ones, and there's modern ones, and there's this and that and the other thing. Pandaw is a privately owned company. It's owned by Bob Strong. He's a Robert Strong, I should say. He's a British philanthropist chap, and he went first of all in Myanmar some 30 years ago. He went back and took the original design of the ships that were used for the colonization of Myanmar back over a century ago, and he basically designed these ships inspired by that design. That's what I particularly like about them is that they are all done in dark, sort of teak, mahogany woods from the local area. So when you sit there on the deck or in the dining room or in your cabin, you feel like you've gone back to the late 19th century. It's a wonderful feeling. So the ships are very cozy. The staff that they have are always wonderful. They are super friendly. They are very attentive. Like, it really feels like 5-star service. I wouldn't call this a 5-star program, but at the same time, it feels like it because the staff care so much about your experience. And it's like, even when you come back from your day and they give you like some wipes to wipe off your shoes. It sounds crazy, but it's the little details that I think make all the difference. So we, of course, have all of our meals on board. There's a lovely restaurant. We can dine inside. We can dine outside. There's a lounge. There's a bar. They even have a little massage room on there. So you can have a massage. Here's the thing. We have the whole ship to ourselves. So this is the other thing. Assuming that we get enough of our members signed up, and I know a lot of people are interested already, we're going to have the whole ship to ourselves. So it's an exclusive wheel and anchor charter. And so I'm very excited about that because, for those of you who may have been with us, in Croatia or, on one of our other programs, when it's just us, it's a different vibe and it's a lot more fun. Everybody lets their guard down a little bit because we don't have to be worried about what the conversation is. But anyway, there's a lot of benefits to that. Here's a shot of one of the cabins. Again, you see the wood. They're comfy, they're cozy. It's just the best way to go. I mean, there's no two ways about it. The ship has a total of 20 cabins. Although a couple of them are designated for our host and for extra staff as we needed, but so we'll probably have around 30 members on this trip. There's double cabins. There's so with a large double bed or 2 single beds. There's all configurations on 2 decks. And the way that we've arranged this is that I managed to get a very good deal for solo travelers, taking a cabin on the main deck, and that is, I think, going to be great. So if you're a solo traveler looking for a way to do this trip without paying a huge single supplement, there is some, mostly because of the hotels. Then again, this is the way to do it. So enough about that. You'll see more photos, details in the program itinerary. So we're going to embark on the ship from Kampong Cham, and the next morning we're going to show up. The first couple of days of the trip is all about sort of villages in Cambodia. So there is a nice balance between passing by the river, the parts of the river that are busy, that have villages and towns and activities and all the rest of it, and parts of the river which is just nature, just sublime, just huge because it's, when we get out to the Delta, it's just massive. Anyway, I'll get to that part. So what we're going to do on this first day, some of the highlights here is walk through some of these villages and see what life is actually there. One of my favorite parts that we're going to do on this very first day is we're going to visit a school. And if you've been overseas to some of these third world countries, and you've had the chance to visit a school and see the kids there and their learning and what they're doing and the environment that they're in, and they usually will let us interact with the pupils and all the rest of it. It's a very moving experience, and I think it's one of the things that becomes one of the highlights of the trip, because you always think about that. And we encourage our members, bring something light, some books, some pencils, anything, because it how we exactly distribute that and all the rest of it is one thing, because there's a way to do it, but anyway, that's we take care of all that stuff. But the experience of going to a school is really, really quite amazing. We're also going to visit a silk island, and when we say a silk island, this is a place where the local people are dedicated to producing silk, so we will get to see the whole process from the silkworm. Silkworms are endemic to the area, so we'll see the process from how they extract the silk from the worms, and then make it into the silk, and then of course create these wonderful fabrics that are ubiquitous with the local costume and so on and so forth. And we'll also take in a demonstration of bokator, which is a form of martial arts that is particular for this part of Cambodia. So again, a fascinating day. As we continue down the river, we will pass the former capital of Cambodia, which is a town called Udong. And in Udong, there's a couple different things we're going to do. For one, we're going to visit a Vipassana center. And so if any of you are joining me in Thailand this coming January, we're also going to be doing a Vipassana. Vipassana is silent meditation. So many people, particularly in Asia, particularly of Buddhist religion, will go on a silent meditation retreat on a so-called Vipassana to meditate basically for a week. So we're not going to do that for a whole week. We won't even do that for an hour. It'll be a fairly short visit for those of you. But if you've never tried it before, if you've never witnessed something like that or experienced it, it's very, very interesting. A chance for you to go a little bit inside, so you get a sample of that. Probably the highlights for the day are the Buddhist temple, the so-called Udon Castle that they call, or sorry, Udon Mountain that they call it here, which is this mammoth gleaming white, wow, I mean, is a structure. So we'll have a chance to sort of not climb up to the top. You can't go to the top, but go up onto the hill where it sits and visit this, and and a few other places as well. In fact, they're going to take us around by ox cart, which is always kind of a fun experience as well. Get on the back, two people getting pulled by an ox through town. So again, you feel like you've gone back in time by 100 years. It's really quite an amazing day. The scenery changes again as we pull into Phnom Penh. Phnom Penh, of course, is the capital of Cambodia, and I would say it's kind of like you would think that Bangkok was 30 years ago or 40 years ago. They have some incredible monuments, the Royal Palace, the Silver Pagoda. So we'll see all of that. And the fun thing again is that we're actually going to, in support of the so-called Cyclo Center, which is a charity that is helps out people who are really in need, and a lot of people in Cambodia are in need. But we will ride cyclos, which are basically like pedicabs, and so we will get driven around the city or parts of the old town by pedicab, which gives you a feeling of these things were ubiquitous when I first went to this part of Southeast Asia some 30 years ago. I mean, that's just how people got around. It was bicycles, pedicabs. I mean, the occasional scooter, let alone a car. And nowadays, of course, things have changed a lot, but it's still a wonderful mode of transportation. You can't visit Cambodia without learning about, understanding the history, particularly that that very brutal time in the 1970s when the Khmer Rouge was in power, and literally millions of the population were executed, and it was a terrible time in Cambodia's history. The killing fields, you may know from there was a film done about it back in the 80s. We're going to visit an area, and it's a sobering moment, but I think that part of the experience of these trips is also seeing this stuff, understanding what happened, why it happened, how they got out of it. The Vietnamese came to their rescue in the late 70s, and thankfully got rid of the Khmer regime that was responsible for all this stuff. I mean, every society has gone through this, and certainly Cambodia, that's part of its very dark history. And I think it's an important part of what we're going to see along the way. The river cruise continues. So you think about how the days are going to go along, because, you're cruising down the river. At parts, it's so wide that it's like a lake. And we're out for the day or out for the morning. We come back for lunch. So we have 3 meals on board. And, every time you get back on the ship and the staff greets you, and it's just sublime. The experience is really lovely. It's sobering in a way, because let's face it, you're living in the lap of luxury relative to the people around you. But I think that's the benefit of participating in a trip like this, is because you get to see parts that you probably wouldn't go to overland, because it would be kind of an arduous journey. So we move down the Mekong River downstream, getting closer to, in fact, we'll reach the Vietnam border at Chau Doc. And here again, you're going to see how the landscape changes, and it gets particularly green. You'll see huge expanses of water and rice paddies, and in parts of it there'll be jungles and bird life. So the scenery changes quite a bit. It doesn't all look the same, which is partly what I like about the Mekong, because as you get towards the Delta, it becomes even more of a wildlife, sort of a paradise. As we cross in, we're going to visit Chau Doc. We're going to take a trip through the floating markets that are very famous there. So it's, and these things, sure, they're geared to tourists, but they're also part of the way of life, because the Mekong is the transportation access link route for these for the people that live in this area. So going to the markets is also something that the locals do. It's not just for the tourists. So that'll be quite an experience. So as I say, we cross the border into Vietnam. We'll have an e-visa for Vietnam, so it's all taken care of right on the ship, so it's very easy. You barely will even notice it, and next thing you know, we will be on the Vietnamese side of the river. And again, this picture actually is a great example of some of the tributaries and how you get into this wildlife paradise. So here at Gao Jiong, we're going to head out in sampans. Sampan is the rowboat that you see here, and go into this forest, which is basically flooded. You know what? I forgot to mention one important thing. The day prior, Tonle Sap. I'm going to go back 2 slides because I wanted to mention this. To here, on this day here, very important. Siem Reap is located on the north end of the Tonle Sap. The Tonle Sap is the largest freshwater lake in Southeast Asia. It's like 250 kilometers long and 100 kilometers wide when it's full. And what's interesting about Tonle Sap, because we're actually going to go up part of the Tonle Sap River on the boat, because we're just at the right time of the year as we're switching. As I say, October is the end of the wet season, November the beginning of the dry season, and the lake drops in level as if it was like a tidal sea by meters and meters and meters. I was last there when it was in the dry season, and it was empty, not empty, but I mean the lake was a fraction of the size as at the time that we're going in November. So we'll see the lake as it's receding, and you'll see all these villages and towns all built on stilts. Again, floating markets as well. It's fascinating. Sorry, I just wanted to mention that because I think it's an important little tidbit to have been on Tonle Sap, or at least on the Tonle River. We won't get right into the lake, but we'll get on the river. So excuse me for that, backtracking for a second. So here at Gaozhong, as I say, we'll head out in a rowboat and we'll see the water. The picture really does it justice. Like, this is what the environment looks like. You're going through this forest. There's bird life, amazing opportunities to, to spot birds, and you're just sort of at one with nature. It's an amazing, amazing experience. And then the following day as well at Ben Tre. So we get deeper and deeper into the delta of the Mekong. I mean, we're obviously on the main channel, which is the navigable part with the boat, but the Mekong spreads out like fingers into this massive area. And so this is the real jungly part of the experience as the river flows out towards the Pacific Ocean. We start to see more mangroves. We're going to go in here by boat again, by a small boat, to go to a local village where we're going to have a chance to see the local handicrafts that are produced. And again, what I like about these kind of villages and stuff is that it's not, sure, they're obviously selling stuff to the tourists, because it's not like we're the only ones going down here, but the stuff is very authentic and it's handmade, and it's, you find that less and less unless you get into these more sort of remote areas. So and we'll have a wonderful day, and it'll be our last day on the boat, and we'll just sort of soak it all in, and we'll wish that we could continue another 1,000 miles down the Mekong River, except that, of course, it ends at that point. The following day, we will dock about an hour outside of Ho Chi Minh at a place called Mai To, and that's where our ship will leave us behind, or we shall leave the ship behind, I should say, disembark and head into Ho Chi Minh itself. We'll head right up and have the afternoon. We're not going to have a super busy day, but we definitely will take in the Museum of Vietnamese History. Vietnam, as many of you will know, of course, was colonized by the French for a long, long time. And so they still have a pretty strong relation, and there's a lot of parallels. Even the food, the cuisine in Vietnam, again, very different. You've probably more likely been to a Vietnamese restaurant. In Canada, they're a little bit more common, not as much as Thai, of course, but you see that immediately with the food, the flavors, and so on and so forth, and even with the buildings, in particularly the old part of Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh is a sprawling metropolis. I mean, when I first went there, which was over 30 years ago, like the first skyscrapers were being put up. But in the meantime, parts of it look like New York City. I mean, it's really quite a spectacular city to see. So we'll have a couple of days there. The key thing to see, again, if Cambodia had its Khmer regime, of course, Vietnam, the war, for a lot of us, it's in our memories. That was during the 1970s, and we will head up to Ben Duoc, to part of the complex of what they call the Cu Chi tunnels. And so, as many of you will know, the Vietnamese were amazingly resilient in fighting the Americans, and part of that was, particularly in the area around Ho Chi Minh City, was owing to this incredible network of tunnels that they built, literally hundreds of kilometers of tunnels on different levels. And there are a number of different spots that you can go to. We're going to go to one that's a little bit further outside the city. We're going to drive an extra half an hour, because it's worth going to Ben Duoc, because the area of tunnels and so on in that area is much greater than sort of the main tourist site. So I wanted to do something, and I remember having visited this again the first time, like some 30 years ago, and not just, it's a bit of an adventure, because you can, depending on how claustrophobic you are or not, you can go in tunnels where literally you're on your hands and knees, and you get to see how they built almost like an entire city underground, which protected them from the invaders. Fascinating. But on top of all that, the temple itself, the memorial. And what I found fascinating as well is that it seems to me that the Vietnamese today, or at least, when I was there, and that was 30 years ago. So, I mean, that was, a lot closer to the time of the Vietnam War, but they don't seem to hold a grudge. I think the fact that we're Canadians makes a difference a little bit, but they're very factual, very objective about everything that went down, and they're very proud of who they've become as a nation. I mean, of course, Vietnam has flourished in the last 30 years, and the changes that I've seen that have happened, it's really, really remarkable. So. That'll be a good taste of Ho Chi Minh City, of Saigon. There's so much to see there. You could stay on for some more time, but what we've actually done is we are creating a whole separate trip around Vietnam that will marry on to the back of this, that will start with Ho Chi Minh and then continue up to the cities of Da Nang and Hue and Hanoi, of course, the capital, and Ninh Binh, which is an incredible site. So that is going to be a whole separate trip. We're going to release it in a webinar about 2 weeks from now. And because I know that some of our members have done the Mekong before, maybe they want to come back. But for those that have done, the part of this trip, you have the opportunity to do the Vietnam trip, or you have the opportunity to do both. And actually, what we've been able to accomplish is, I think, for what would effectively be almost a month-long trip, it's extremely well priced. So on that note, this trip next year, for everything I've just described, is available at starting at 6480 double occupancy on the upper deck. And as you can see, for single occupancy on the main deck, and we don't have a limited number of cabins, we've only got a few, but at 7390. Now, here's the thing: for our members, $500 off for anybody that books before the end of January. So take $500 off these numbers, so it'll be $5,980, so under 6,000 Canadian dollars for this trip, which is basically almost 2 weeks in duration. That's the deal for members of Wheel and Anchor as of now. So I think, and the details will come in the program itinerary. You're going to get all this sent to you by email in the next 24 hours. What's included on this? I think I mentioned everything. Of course, as usual, we pick you up private airport transfers in Siem Reap. In fact, we're going to do a little VIP service, so you'll get fast-tracked through immigration and all the rest of this stuff. You've got a very nice hotel, the Avani in Siem Reap, where we're going to be staying for the first 4 nights. We have the Pandoc cruise, which has 3 meals a day on board, also unlimited soft drinks. So you've got all your drinks as well on the ship in that. All of those wonderful sightseeing tours and boat rides and all the rest of it included. It's a pretty fully packed program. Of course, we'll have a host that goes for the whole trip. And yeah, that's basically it. So there's not much extra other than those little trinkets that you want to pick up along the way, that you have that you have to pay for on this trip. Of course, airfare is extra, but airfares to Asia have been actually not too bad of late. So far, they've stayed pretty constant. You're probably looking in and around. In fact, I think these numbers are a little bit high. Last time when I was looking, you could still get in there for around sort of 12 to 1,400 bucks Canadian from the East Coast, and a little bit less from the West Coast because you're a little bit closer. So, but of course, we'll look into that before. So now is the time for questions and answers. And Paul, is there anything else that I missed? I think I mentioned about the weather, but maybe I didn't mention it enough because I know the question's going to come up. This is a great time to go. As I said, October is the end of the wet season into the dry season. So by the time we're in here, sure, you may get the occasional shower, but the temperatures in November are usually in the mid to high 20s. They might touch 30. And in the evening, it sort of cools down to the low 20s. It's a great time to go weather-wise. So anyway, that's that. Questions?
All right. Yes, we have a question here from Alina asking if we are looking at adding Luang Prabang.
Not on that Vietnam trip. So that's in Laos. So the Vietnam extension that we're going to do is just Vietnam. So we will not be doing Laos on that trip. Unfortunately, the issue with all this is that you could go on and on and on to different places. So, and there's so many places just in Vietnam to see. So we won't be doing Luang Prabang. I'm hoping at another trip to do a whole separate tour to Laos and maybe with Thailand and so on, but not on this one. Yeah.
Another follow-up question to that is, are there any cultural performances at Anchor that are included in the itinerary?
Yes, we do have some cultural performances on board ship. We'll have actually the second day after we arrive in Siem Reap, we're going to have a special dance troupe with some of the cultural things. So we'll definitely see over the course of the whole itinerary, there is at least 2 or 3. And sorry, I forgot to mention those during the itinerary. That's part of it as well. So that's a part of going to that part of the world.
You could tell there's a lot of information to share, and yeah, quite excited about it. Another question here with regards to what currency is accepted in Cambodia and Vietnam.
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, Cambodia has its official currency, which is the Cambodian riel. However, you find that they use US dollars almost as much, or in some cases even more. So this is one of those few places that I would say for Cambodia, it's good to have US dollars in small denominations, particularly for shopping in those markets and doing all the bartering and all the rest of it. Cambodia, definitely reals. In Vietnam, they use the dong. And so you could use some of the US dollars in Vietnam, but it's a more robust currency, and also just the politics and the economy in Vietnam is such that, you know, they're much more attached to their currency. So it's a good question. But again, we suggest that, you know, people get a WISE card for the ease of currency, of changing currencies and so on and so forth. But it is good, because we're visiting all these villages, to have a handful of smaller local currency on hand.
Perfect. Carol had a question here with regards to what immunizations or medications might be required. Can you touch on specifically yellow fever and malaria?
Good question. So first of all, I can't officially give advice on shots to take, because you have to get that advice from a physician, from your own physician, or from a travel clinic. Yellow fever is not one that's required for these countries. It's typically one if you're going from a yellow fever country to some other countries. So if you were traveling from Southern Africa to Cambodia, you might need a yellow certificate, but you're coming from Canada. So that's not one that you have to worry about. There are some other ones that are recommended by physicians. Personally, when I travel to that region, I'm just talking about me personally, I don't take anything. Malaria, again, not so much of an issue down there, but you may get advice because of the lower Mekong to take a malaria prophylaxis. So you kind of have to do make your own judgment call on that.
Yeah.
But personally, I've not had an issue with anything when traveling anywhere around this region. So
yeah, fantastic. Another question here from Virginia's come in is if there will be Wi-Fi available on the cruise.
There is Wi-Fi available, yes, and the Wi-Fi is done based on a local mobile network. So I would not say that it's 100% reliable the whole way, but in most places. So my recommendation for this kind of program is there is the ship's Wi-Fi, but they basically use a Wi-Fi, like a modem that comes off the local cellular network. If somebody's looking for reliable Wi-Fi, we'll just arrange a SIM card when you get into Cambodia. Unfortunately, you do need 2 because it's 2 different systems in Cambodia and Vietnam. And last check, they weren't compatible with one another. You can, of course, use your phone from home. It's obviously expensive to use a Canadian SIM card, but my experience was the last time you will find a signal for most places where we're near any kind of an urban settlement. When you're in the middle of the Mekong Delta and there's nothing around, there'll be definitely holes. So don't expect it the whole time, but for the most part you can get.
Perfect. And then one other question here that I have is with regards to language. How easy is it to communicate with English?
Yeah, that's a good
throughout?
one. So here's what I found. What's interesting is in Cambodia, they start educating the children with English at a very young age. So I found in Cambodia, it's amazing that people, I mean, they don't speak fluent English, but you can get by in the markets and all around. People speak at some level of English. Like that. I found it very comfortable. Vietnam, not as much as Cambodia. The older generation in Vietnam, still a lot of them grew up with French. And so it's still okay. And certainly in the tourist places, obviously you don't need to worry about the hotels and the staff on board the ship. It's really the markets and so on. But, we are going to places where, let's be honest, we're not going to be the first tourists there. So it's pretty good. If you get into a far-flung part of, Ho Chi Minh City on your own and all the rest of it, then yeah, you may run into some issue, but my experience has been it's communication's not been a problem.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gordon. That's all the questions I've had come in so far.
Okay, good. Well, if you do have any other questions, obviously, as always, drop us a note, give us a call, because we want to make sure you get your questions answered. Most important thing, $500 early bird bonus for anybody that signs up before the end of January, for Wheel and Anchor members. So please, if you're interested in this trip, sign up early. I think there's quite a bit of interest in it. So we'd like to have you come along and enjoy this wonderful part of the world. This is a truly, truly amazing voyage. Okay, on that note, take care. I hope the weather gets better or stays better. Okay, I won't say anything about that. Greetings from here in Mauritius in the Southern Indian Ocean. I won't tell you what the weather's like here. And we'll catch up with you on our next webinar, which will be next Thursday. Paula, which is, do you remember?
Japan, but I don't have the link for it yet.
Japan, sorry. That's right. Japan phase 2. So our program to Japan, ancient and modern, with the pre and post programs in Korea and Taiwan. That's happening next week. Join us for that. And you'll find the link in the newsletter this weekend if you didn't get it already. Thanks again, everybody. And we'll catch up to you soon.